Hello and welcome to Streams, brought to you by Good News Broadcasting. This is the podcast where we review and critique popular TV shows and movies on our streaming platforms and explore their themes and see how they may align or conflict with Scripture so you can watch with wisdom. My name is Eamon and today I'm joined by Tom. Thanks for coming. How's life? What's going on?
Well, that was a lot of questions.
I know, very deep questions as well.
I presume you don't actually want to know the answers, so I'm doing fine, thanks. Thanks for having me on the programme again. Looking forward to it. We had and ahed about this in the office because I got some beef with the Catholics as a Protestant, so I know that might blow your mind, but I'm not a discernment ministry guy. I'm not here to set the record straight, and so we're going to talk about Conclave. I mean, I'm going to try not to bash Catholics. If there's a little bit, you might let that go, but just know I've got beef. But we're going to talk about the film. So that's why I think we weren't fully sure.
But then obviously with the Pope's death, it felt appropriate to talk
Very
about
much
this
so.
film. The whole film is just about voting in a new Pope, basically, which is what the process is going to be taking place when they vote in this new Pope. So we thought it's worth talking about, even if you have to bash Catholics, just a little bit.
Did you hear who the front runner is?
No?
Trump.
Joe, when you asked the question, I thought to myself,
Is that the first
there's
thing
going
that
to be
came to
some
mind?
joke that's going to happen here.
It is true, though. It was last week. He said in some speech, he was asked who he thought was the front runner for the new Pope. And he said, I would be the best Pope. I want to be the Pope. Maybe 10 years ago, that would have seemed so ridiculous. But stranger things have happened. Imagine he managed to join together the US presidency and the Pope. I mean, this would be the new world order. This would be the end of the world.
Well, this is very like Illuminati of you.
I know you like that kind of stuff.
Just for the record, I don't like that kind of stuff. I find it funny.
I mean, I don't think it can actually be Trump, but that is just a true Trumpism, isn't it? Just like,
Yeah.
You know what, there's a role available, I would be the best person to do it. Now, I'm going to say that proves to any American or even British Christians, evangelicals, Protestants who think like he's a good guy, if he thinks he could also be the Pope, you've got questions to answer. I thought that was interesting. It can't be Trump, but it's very Trump-like to put his name forward.
Whether he's serious or not, it is very much like him to kind of go, yep, I'm going to be the new Pope. So I'm not surprised that he did that at all. But this film basically was released in 2024, and it's based on a book with the same name by a man named Robert Harris. I've not read the book, don't know if it's any good or not, but basically this film stars Ralph Fiennes, I think that's how you say his name, and he's been around the block, he's been in loads of movies, hasn't he? I mostly know him from Harry Potter, because he's Voldemort. I know you're going to think that's outrageous. No, Schindler's List as well, I've seen that. But I've seen him in loads of stuff, but those are the two ones I think about when I think of him.
I'm not here to judge.
But this movie is now available on Amazon Prime, so you can go away and watch it, even though it just says come out. And so, Tom, why don't you just give people the plot? What is Conclave all about?
Okay, so it starts with the death of the Pope. As you mentioned, he is obviously fictional. It's not based on the actual Pope. Then the film follows this guy, Cardinal Thomas Lawrence, who's the Dean of the College of Cardinals, who's tasked with overseeing the papal conclave to choose the next Pope. Now, it should be a religious film, it is, but it feels very political, more kind of inner politics, not kind of Labour versus Conservative. You know what I mean? But it feels like it is a political drama, and that's the way some people have described it. As the conclave starts, there are four main options for the cardinals to choose from. Each cardinal comes from a different theological leaning, from progressive through to traditionalist, but will it remain that way?
Wow, nice cliffhanger there.
Thanks. Yeah, after watching Conclave, it seemed like the right thing. I will just say, my dad read the book and really liked it. And I watched the film with him, and he said it was very similar, but there was something different at the end. That would be more the spoiler section, but he really enjoyed it. And interestingly, I actually downloaded the film on Kindle. I was going to read it, and then I actually heard that Conclave was coming out and thought, I'll just watch the film.
Very lazy of you.
That's true. It is.
So we'll dive into some of the spoilers in a little bit. Obviously, it's been nominated for a bunch of Oscars, this
Has
movie.
it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think it was kind of up for the best movie or best picture. And I think Ralph Fiennes was put up for best actor, that type of stuff. For me, that's always a bit of a red flag for a film. Because I always think the films that get Oscars are the films that are just really dull and boring that I would never watch. As a Marvel Star Wars guy, Lord of the Rings vibe, I'm not into those types of films. So when I heard it was up for Oscars, I just thought it was going to be a bit dull and a bit rubbish. But then you watched it and you said you really liked it. And so then I thought, I'll give this a bash as well. And I thought it was actually very good. I enjoyed it. I think it's more interesting than anything else. There's not really any killing or action or fighting or superheroes or taking the one ring to Mordor type thing. but there is just kind of that internal politics and like the way the church functioned and stuff like that. That's very, very interesting. And I actually quite enjoyed it.
I agree. I felt like it's a true slow burn. If you'd said to me, I didn't enjoy it, nothing happened, and it was boring, I feel like I couldn't argue with you because I think that is right. Nothing really happens, but it is filmed so beautifully. The scenes, the angles were just very, very picturesque, and I thought it was done very well. I thought the acting was really strong because when you haven't got all those usual tropes to fall back on for drama, for making something intense and making something, a real thriller, you have to rely on, one, the script, and two, the acting. And so I was convinced by the acting, as in, this is real. They really are going in to vote. There really is all this political back and forth. Who's going to be the new pope? I believed it. It's funny because me and my dad really enjoyed it. My brother fell asleep and thought it was one of the most boring things he's ever seen. And so I can't argue with that. And so I wouldn't mind if you didn't like it. But I'm quite glad that you liked it because it's probably a little bit out of your usual type film that you would enjoy.
100%. I think one of the things that really stood out to me, just the costumes. I've never ever looked at a film and gone, oh, that costume is really good, other than superhero films, because I'm comparing a costume to like a comic or something like that. I'm trying to see how accurate they are. But in any other film, I've never thought about what the person wears. But for this one, I thought, oh, all the robes look really wicked, and all the hats and the different types of kind of attire for different kind of occasions. As a whole, it was really well done.
Yeah.
Even though the film might not be action-packed, the acting, the shots, the costume, all that type of stuff, the whole package kind of made me stay and go, this is actually quite decent.
Yeah. So I don't know about filming shots and the angle that you do it all in, but it felt dated. Like you think of new films and it's really crisp and the colours, it wasn't that way. It was kind of toned down. And I was wondering if there was something in the way that it was filmed, alluding to the fact that this whole process is ancient. And a lot of the people in the film were ancient, were very old. And I think that was a stylistic choice as well. Even the sounds, you talk about what they were wearing, like when he's putting on like his garb and he's kind of patting it down and putting it on, like I think all the microphones turned up loud to pick up every sound. And I did mention in a previous Streams episode that they like the up close, pretty much up his nose, and you hear him breathing a lot. And again, it should annoy me, don't like that kind of thing. But it had a closeness again. And I wonder if the appeal was, this is so not our world. And I remember when Pope Francis was elected as Pope, and it just seemed so intriguing, the whole process. And it felt like, although this is fiction, and although I think it is fairly true to form in some areas, it's not a documentary. I do think we like to peer behind the veil and see what's happening. And so I think that was intriguing as well. The role of Pope is huge. I mean, he's not the most important man in the world, but will oversee over 1 billion people in their faith. And so to be able to see a little bit of that process, I think is intriguing as well. And as I've mentioned a number of times, I don't like series that are bloated. I don't like series that are trying to make drama for the sake of it. This film largely, I'll give a couple of caveats later on, but largely didn't go near any of that stuff and just allowed the strength of the filming, the acting, and the script to shine through.
Lovely. And so I think that's a good segue really into the rating perspective. And so if you don't know, if you've never listened to Streams before, we give it a rating between 1 and 5. So 1 is kind of do not watch this. This is not good or safe for Christians. It'll have loads of things that will just lead you astray, not worth it. Whereas 5 is something that's super safe, super friendly. Anyone can watch this. Happy days. I personally gave it a 5.
Okay.
So it's rated a PG. There's no swearing to what I remember. There is no sex scenes. There's no murder. It is just a bit of a slow burn film. And so it's rated PG. And I just thought there's nothing really that can offend you in a certain way that's maybe going to lead you astray or do anything like that. You may not like what's going on, or you may disagree with things theologically, of course, but that doesn't mean that it lowers my rating, if that makes sense. So I'd give it a 5. I just thought there's no beef with this. What would you give it?
I would give it a 4.
Ooh, interesting. Why a 4?
All of that you said, you just have to be careful not to spend too much time with Catholics. So that's...
Why can't you spend too much time with Catholics?
You just got to be careful, haven't you?
Okay, I'm just going to move on for that one. Don't even want to touch that, guys. So we're going to the spoiler section now, so we can get the big twist, the big reveal at the end. If you're going to watch the film, this is your opportunity. You can turn off, you can go away, watch it, come back to us. We're giving you ample amounts of time.
Should we have a little musical interlude? Should we sing our song? Cardi, Conclave, Conclave. Don't pretend like you haven't been singing that in the office.
That has been in the office for the
You
past
just like
2
going
weeks.
to the toilet, making a brew. You just go, Conclave. I don't know where it came from. I don't know why you do it, but I'm naming and shaming you on the podcast.
I have no idea where it came from. I have no idea why I do it, but it has been on repeat.
I wonder if it will finish after we've recorded this. It'll be out of your brain. Maybe you'll move on.
Yeah.
Who knows?
We don't have a speaker in the office for music, and so I'm just providing the music, the entertainment.
Thanks for that. Yeah. It's a tune.
Great
It's a
tune.
bop.
Let's get into the nitty gritty of this film. We'll start basically at the end, the twist, because I think this is like the thing that most people talked about with this film. So I was on Twitter and I saw Christians talk about this film, Protestants, that is, and they were saying Conclave is woke, don't watch Conclave. And then when I tried to do a bit of research, I found out what the twist was before I watched the film. And the twist basically is that the Pope that they elect is intersex. That's something they only find out after they've elected him as Pope. And I think it's only the guy who is orchestrating the conclave. He's the one that finds out. I don't think the rest of the cardinals find out. And I don't think the implication is that he's going to tell the rest of the cardinals. I think they're going to keep it a secret. But I remember just hearing that on Twitter and everyone's going, it's gone woke, it's gone crazy and madness. And then when I watched it, I kind of felt, well, it's not that deep.
Yeah.
It's not like he's saying I'm transgender or I'm actually a woman, but I present myself like a man or something like that. It's just, I'm just intersex. And he's kind of been a man his whole life, I think the implication was, and stuff like that. And so I just thought it was a bit overblown, that twist at the end. When I saw it, I was kind of like, well, what's the big fuss about, really? I understand it to a certain extent, but I just thought, what's the big fuss about?
Yeah, you'd said before I went to see it, oh man, there's this bit at the end, though, that like just ruins the whole thing. And so I'd been waiting for that bit. And then when it happened, I had the same response as you. And I thought the reaction to it was overblown. But I also think it wasn't essential for the story. I don't know if Robert Harris, who wrote the book originally, had wanted to just add in like oh, you wouldn't believe this. You know, the big twist at the end of films. And I didn't think it was essential. And I thought the fact that we are in spoilers, aren't we? So we can say that guy obviously gets voted as the Pope. That was so unbelievable as well. When you think about the whole process of people that had been waiting for years to be voted for and all the back and forth, you know, if you vote for this person and I'll vote there, tactical voting. I thought, although there was so much drama but lack of kind of content through it, I thought that was, for me personally, I thought that was a little bit weak at the end.
Yeah, definitely. Because I thought the strength of the whole film and the story was the internal politics between the cardinals. They didn't even know who he was because he's in, I think it's Afghanistan or somewhere in the Middle East.
No one was allowed to know that he'd been put in place.
And so
as a
he'd
cardinal.
been put in place as a cardinal by the old Pope who's passed away. And so when he passes away, he kind of comes and says, hey, I'm a cardinal. The Pope made me a cardinal. And they kind of bring him in, accept him, and he is part of the process now. But no one knows who he is. No one's ever heard of him before. No one knows what his position is on all these different topics and stuff like that. And so the fact that kind of he became Pope was a bit kind of crazy, as well as the twist. Yeah. But I thought the internal politics was really interesting to watch, and seeing how, as you were saying earlier, you've got kind of the traditionalists, you've got the liberals, you've got kind of people from different nations and stuff like that, kind of all battling it out almost in a certain way to try and become this next Pope and rally support. And you kind of see at certain points, well, they'll have dinner and something will happen. And then afterwards they're in like the stairwell and they're talking like, you need to vote for them and you need to kind of get support from these groups and these people. It was so interesting to see how that played out. Because again, we don't get an insight into that. We don't get to see that when they are kind of in a real life conclave. And so it was interesting to see that that is a possibility of what goes on. Now, I did do some homework.
Oh, very good.
I did do some research. And I basically tried to find out how true this conclave was to real life. And there isn't a huge amount of information that's out there because it is quite a secretive process. But I heard one Catholic priest quoted from a cardinal who went through a conclave many years ago and talked about his experience. And he was saying that it's not so much political, that there is a lot of prayer, there is a lot of silence, and that when they come forward to cast their vote, they have to say that they believe it's the will of God for this person they voted to be the Pope. And so it seems like it's very different in real life. But I mean, I imagine there's probably some kind of political element in there, whether it's overt or whether it's covert.
Yeah, I think the thing that struck me was how human it is. And that's interesting that you say about the cardinal, because I'm not surprised that he would want to say it's far more spiritual. Because you look at this thing where it is men make mistakes, as you and I do, making such a huge decision, try to find God's will, but thinking from your own standpoint.
I listened to a bunch of Catholic priests review this film, and I wanted to kind of understand what their perspective was on that. And they picked up on the human element of the cardinals within this film. And so one person said that they hated the politics and the division and the human element, because they were saying the church was given by Christ to this world and all this type of stuff, and it's a really spiritual thing, and was kind of really over-egging the spiritual element of deciding this new pope as the vicar of Christ and the spiritual element to the pope itself. And so said he hated the politics, hated the division, hated the human element, because it depicted the cardinals in a bad light and ultimately the church in a bad light, because they're supposed to be quite high up representatives of what it is to be a Christian. Whereas another Catholic priest, he said he loved the human element and the division and the politics, because he said that shows us how man is flawed and how man makes mistakes and how we can often operate in the flesh and all this type of stuff. And so I thought it was very interesting to kind of see those two perspectives, even though they belong to the same faith and they kind of obviously have the same perspective on many things, that they could view it in two different lights. And so I don't really know what to take from that, but I thought it was very interesting that they view it in that way.
The role is so huge, isn't it? And they say that the Pope is ultimately God's person to lead the church, but they are involved in voting for who the person is. And so that's just a weird dynamic, that there's all this debating back and forth. You have to stand up at the front and say, I believe this is who God wants me to vote for. But so often they have to change their vote. You know what I mean? If everyone stayed with their original vote, then you're never going to come to a consensus. So it's got to be more political. You've got to then go back to the drawing board and go, actually, have I got the right person? And I imagine the dynamic between somebody who's going to be more of a reformer, somebody who's going to be a little bit more progressive, compared to a traditionalist, that would be a huge decision. If you're somebody who is convinced that the Catholic Church needs to be reformed, it needs to change its views on certain things, then you're just not going to believe that God would want a traditionalist who's going to go back to doing the Mass in Latin and, you know, all that stuff. So I think you can't get away from the fact that deciding a new pope has a very strong human element in it, even if you believe that God is going to work through your discussions and that kind of stuff. And so I was struck by how human the decision is. I already knew that. I think that was balanced well. And I felt throughout the film, the tension is on who's going to become the new pope. But there is underlying, for me, there was this thought of something's going to be revealed. There's going to be a scandal. And that's why I was a little bit disappointed with the grand reveal at the end, because I don't think that was really what people were thinking. I think there didn't need to be a reveal at the end to know that there was this tension of basically who's going to be exposed amongst the cardinals. And you constantly had that. You thought, who is it going to be? And obviously a few of them, you got John Lithgow's, was he Cardinal Joseph Tremblay? And he was interesting because there is discussion that maybe the Pope had, I don't know if sacked him basically from the position before he died. And that is debated. And then you've got, Isabella Rossellini, who's Sister Maria, and she seems to know things about certain cardinals that threatens to be kind of released. And so I look at all the cardinals and I just think, and maybe this is because of the world we live in and because of the scandals in the Catholic Church in recent years, I'm looking at each of the cardinals thinking, what are you going to be exposed for? You know, and before we get too comfortable in kind of throwing dirt at the Catholic Church, I think we've got to admit that right now within the Protestant faith, there are so many leaders that have been exposed for secret sin, for abusive practices over the years, sometimes over decades. And so we've got to recognize that leadership is a dangerous position and people need to hold short accounts with the Lord. And whether you're Catholic or whether you're in the Church of England or whatever it is, we have to be careful about putting leaders on a pedestal that they should not be on. And so I came away just reminded of that I thought, man, leaders are fallen and yet they are saved and regenerated and full of the Spirit, but they cannot take the weight of responsibility that we so easily put on them. And yes, that stood out to me.
Yeah, definitely. I think it also kind of brought up a lot of thoughts around kind of how we pick our leaders in churches. And many churches have different methods of picking elders and leaders and pastors or whatever you want to call your church leadership. And often I think that it can be quite political, even when it's just a Protestant church and you just kind of nominating a pastor. You can kind of look at gifting over character, and you can neglect certain elements of people's lifestyle and where they're at or what's going on in their lives or how long they've been a Christian for, whatever it may be, because there is that element of kind of, we wanted to get someone in who is really gifted in this area or someone who's really gifted in that area. So even though they may have some character flaws, we'll just get them in anyway. We'll sort those things out later. And it kind of really begs a question of how should we pick our leaders and what should our leaders look like? Should they be squeaky clean? Or should they be people who are a bit flawed and that could need work or whatever else? And how should we do that? Should that be through a voting system in the congregation? Should that be through a job advert where you've got like a board who will kind of look at the job applications, do interviews, invite to preach for a Sunday and test them how they are? And I thought he kind of really brought up a lot of thoughts around that of how we pick our leaders and what our leaders should actually look like. Because I think in the Bible, it does kind of paint a clear picture in Timothy and in Titus of what an elder and overseer should look like in terms of character and kind of how they should function. But I don't think that we're really strict on that. I think we are kind of quite loosey-goosey with it. So we kind of come in and say, well, they need to be this, this, and this, but they don't have to necessarily be that, that, and that. And I thought it was quite interesting to kind of see how the Catholics play that out with their most important role, but then also made me think of how we should do it in our settings.
Yeah, I certainly think there are clear characteristics, aren't there? There are requirements of elders to be an overseer, but there are things that are clearly not on the list, but without really saying it, we believe are essential. And so it doesn't say you need to be a really good preacher, but you're looking for somebody who's gifted in that area. And so, yeah, I think we've got clear mandate there that is very easy to neglect. And I think for me, the plurality of elders is key if possible. And I understand I've got a friend of mine who planted a church recently who always had longed to plant a church with somebody else, wasn't able to find somebody else who he felt was qualified and at the right place at the right time. But I think that one leader overseeing a lot of people for a long time isn't the Bible's preference. Again, there are so many situations, aren't there, where what the Bible leads us towards, where we want to get to, isn't always the scenario that we're in. But yeah, I believe that the Bible makes it pretty clear. I think ideally we want to grow leaders from within the congregations, don't we? And so it is a strange thing to kind of import a leader from somewhere else. And lots of church denominations do that. But kind of being an autonomous church which governs itself can still be part of a wider grouping of people if you want. I think I'm somewhere between a Congregationalist Baptist and Presbyterian in terms of church polity. There's somewhere in there, but I understand there are various points where a bigger structure is more helpful. But I just think, even look like the Church of England, which I'm part of currently, their process for choosing a new archbishop that's going to happen fairly soon is really quite convoluted as well. You start with all the bishops getting together and hashing it out, many, many meetings. And then from there, it's the CNC, apparently, takes a name to the Prime Minister, and then the Prime Minister has to agree it, and then the Prime Minister takes it to the King. So as easy as it is for me to look at the Catholic Church and look at the conclave and think, oh, man, that's ridiculous. That's the way you choose a leader. My own church that I'm involved in, that's how they do it. Church and state are too combined there. I want to see a separation between church and state more than that. And obviously with the Catholics, I mean, they've got their own city, haven't they, in Rome. But anyway.
Yeah, they've got their own country.
Their own country, sorry, you're right. Yeah, absolutely.
So the Pope is literally like the spiritual leader of a billion people and also a king of a nation state, which is...
Why not?
Which is wild.
Neither me or you, and I imagine most of our listeners, aren't from a Catholic background. But I think a good sign of a film is when you come away and it makes you think about things in your own life, even if they're not directly related. And so we're part of different church gatherings, different denominations or groupings, but there was still stuff in my mind that I came away thinking about. And so that's always a good sign. I thought what they should do, if any Catholics are deciding, how to choose the new Pope, this would be, obviously you come to me for wisdom on this, just do it like the Coptic Orthodox Church do.
How do they do it?
So they have a group of finalists, then they take a young boy, they blindfold him, they put the names into a hat or a bag, I think it's a bag, and he pulls out the name from the hat. And that is the new Coptic Orthodox leader, just chosen by a blindfolded kid.
I mean, that is wild.
But, I mean...
It's very Acts.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we could get into the whole kind of casting lots and stuff. That would leave it more open to the Lord choosing.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I didn't know that. Well, there you go. I found 2 other reviews from Catholics on this film. First one said they loved it because of it depicted Catholics, basically. They're like, just basically shines Catholics and how great they are and whatever else, even though there was some division and whatever else. But the fact that there is a movie being made about Catholics, he was just like, that's a good thing. One person said, and the line that I keep talking about and I keep coming back to is, certainty is the great enemy of unity.
We loves it. It's fire. Look at this.
Ever since I watched that film, I've just been sat on that line. And that's the one line I remember, and I just cannot get it out of my head. And I've just been thinking about it and stuff. But this one Catholic guy said that's absolute heresy. He was like, we are the Catholic Church. We are certain. We are the church. Pope is the vicar of Christ. And so what he says goes, that type of thinking of kind of saying doubt in the church and doubt in God and all that type of stuff is not right because of what Christ has given the church to us. I thought that was quite interesting. So as you can see, is a mix of reviews from Catholics, a mix of reviews from Protestants as well, from people saying it's just woke to people saying it was actually quite good like us. And so it's an interesting film. I definitely recommend checking it out. I definitely recommend looking at it. It's not that long. It's not that crazy. So it's worth just, if you're bored for a couple of hours, stick it on. I think you'll find it quite interesting. So is there any final thoughts you want to say before we finish?
As you were talking, I had forgot that doubt was a big aspect of it, actually. That's interesting that obviously Thomas Lawrence, who is heading up the Conclave, himself has been wrestling, hasn't he, with doubts. And they don't go into a huge amount of detail. But I thought that was a really interesting addition to it, that even these men who from the outside, leading lots of people, seen as the spiritual leaders, people to look up to and emulate, are human as well. And we see they're human in terms of how they vote. I already talked about that. But also human in the fact that there can be seasons and times when we struggle or wrestle with things or in life just can't see how God could be working or moving. And so I forgot that had actually impacted me when I watched it and was aware that even those leaders who are leading people can go through those seasons of doubt. And I thought it was nice that was addressed in the film as well. It didn't give any answers particularly, but just allowed that to be a thing, that there could be people who are choosing the new pope who are themselves wrestling with their own faith.
Yeah, very interesting. Very good indeed. Well, that's all the time we have today. Thanks very much for joining us on streams. And if you do end up watching Conclave, we'd love to know your thoughts. We'd love to know what you thought about the film and the twist at the end and the politics and everything like that. And also, if there is a show or a movie that you think we should check out and talk about, then you can just get in touch with us by emailing info@gnba.net. That's info@gnba.net. Just put streams in the subject line and it should get to myself or Tom. And if you have enjoyed this episode, please be sure to follow us, to give us a like, give us a review, whatever your favorite podcast platform does, because it really does help get it out there further. More people discover it, and that's always a good thing. But join us in the next one. I'll see you there.